Good evening, and welcome, wherever you are, and whatever this day has asked of you, you can lay it all down now. The day is over. There is nothing more it needs from you, nothing left to fix, nothing left to carry into the night. So let us begin the way we always begin, with one slow breath. Draw it in gently and let it go. Let your body grow heavy where it rests. Let your shoulders soften and fall. Let your hands lie still and open. Feel the surface beneath you holding all of your weight, so that you no longer have to hold any of it yourself. You do not need to stay awake for this. Truly, you do not. If sleep comes for you while the story is still being told, then let it come. And let it carry you off into the dark. You will lose nothing. The story is only here to walk beside you for a little while, down toward the quiet country of sleep. So we will not hurry. We will move slowly tonight, the way mist moves slowly across a still mountain. We will linger in each place before we move on. Tonight, we are going to Japan. Not the Japan of cities and bright lights, but a far older Japan. The Japan of myth and morning mist, of misty islands rising out of the sea, of gods who lived in the high plain of heaven and walked among the mountains and the rice fields. We are going back to the very beginning of the world, as the old Japanese imagined it, and we are going to follow one of the oldest and most beautiful of all their stories. It is a story about the sun. The Japanese imagined the sun not as a ball of fire, but as a goddess, the most radiant and beloved of all the gods. And tonight, we are going to hear how that sun goddess, in her grief and her anger, once hid herself away inside a cave and sealed the door with a great stone and plunged the whole world into darkness. And how all the other gods, the 8 million gods of heaven and earth, came together to coax her out again and bring the light back to the world. It is, in the end, a story about exactly the thing that is happening to you now, the fading of the light, the coming of the dark, and the certainty, the deep and unfailing certainty that the light will return. That the sun always comes out of the cave again, that the morning always comes. So there is nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to do. Only rest and listen, and let the old story carry you down toward sleep. Let your breathing slow just a little more, and let us go back now to the very beginning, when the world was still young and unformed, and the first gods stood upon the floating bridge of heaven. In the beginning, the old Japanese said, the world was young and unformed. Below the high plain of heaven, where the first gods dwelled, there was only a vast and shapeless ocean, drifting and formless, like oil upon water, like a jellyfish floating in the sea. There was no land, no solid ground, only the endless drifting waters beneath the heavens. And among the first gods of heaven, there came at last a pair, a god and a goddess, a brother and a sister, who were also husband and wife in the way of the gods. Their names were Izanagi, the man who invites, and Izanami, the woman who invites. And to these two, the elder gods of heaven gave a great task. They were to go down and bring order to the drifting world below and make of it solid land. And the elder gods gave them a gift to help them in their work. A spear, a great and jeweled spear called the Spear of Heaven. And Izanagi and Izanami took the spear, and they went and stood upon the floating bridge of heaven, the rainbow bridge that arched between the high plain of heaven and the formless world below. And and standing there upon the bridge, the two of them lowered the great spear down, down, into the drifting waters below. And they stirred. They stirred the formless ocean with the tip of the heavenly spear, round and round, churning the drifting waters, and the waters thickened and curdled and grew heavy around the spear. And then, slowly, the two gods lifted the spear back up out of the sea. And from the tip of the spear, drops of thickened brine fell back down toward the water. Drip, drip, drip. And where those drops fell, they did not sink and vanish. They gathered, they piled up, they thickened and hardened, and they became an island. The first island, the first solid land in all the drifting world. The Japanese gave it a name. They called it Onogoro, the self-forming island. The island that made itself from the drippings of the heavenly spear. And down from the bridge of heaven came Izanagi and Izanami, the two creator gods, to stand at last upon solid ground, upon the first island they had made. And there, upon that first island, they were married, with a gentle ceremony of their own devising, walking around a great pillar they had raised, and meeting on the other side, and greeting one another as husband and wife. And then they began the great work of creation, for Izanagi and Izanami were the parents of the world, and from their union, the islands of Japan were born, one after another, rising up out of the sea. The great islands and the small, the mountains and the valleys, the whole long chain of the land, born of the two creator gods, lifted up out of the drifting waters into the light. And it did not stop with the land. For after the islands, Izanagi and Izanami went on to bring forth the gods of all the things of the world. They gave birth to the god of the sea, and the god of the rivers, and the gods of the mountains, and the trees, and the plains, and the winds. They filled the new-made world with its spirits and its powers, god after god, each one a part of the living world, until the islands were rich and full and humming with divine life. It was a time of making, a time of joy and of plenty, and of the steady, happy work of bringing a whole world into being. The two creator gods, walking their new islands, filling them with life. But it could not last, for into this story of creation, as into all the deepest stories, there came, at last, a death. And it is to that sorrow and to the strange dark journey that followed it that we must now gently turn. The last of the gods that Izanami brought forth was the god of fire, and the birth of fire is a hard thing. For the fire god, as he was born, burned his mother. And Izanami, the great creator goddess, the mother of the islands and of all the gods of the world, was wounded by the birth of fire and fell gravely ill. And though she lingered for a time, bringing forth still more gods, even from her sickbed, in the end the wound was too deep, and Izanami died. The mother of the world died, and her spirit went down, away from the bright island she had made, down into the land of the dead. The Japanese called it Yomi, the land of darkness, the shadowy country beneath the world, where the dead went down and did not return. And Izanagi was broken with grief. He had lost his wife, his sister, his partner in the great work of making the world, and he could not bear it. He wept over her body. He raged. And at last, like others in the old stories of many lands, he resolved to do the impossible. He would go down, down into Yomi, into the land of the dead. and he would find his beloved Izanami, and he would bring her back up into the light, and they would finish making the world together as they were always meant to. And so Izanagi went down through the dark ways beneath the world, down into the shadowed land of Yomi, where no living thing was meant to go. And he came at last to the great hall of the dead, where his wife now dwelled. But the hall was dark, so dark that he could not see her. He could only hear her voice coming to him out of the blackness, and he called to her. He begged her to come back. "The world is not finished," he said. "We have so much still to make. Come back with me into the light." And out of the darkness, the voice of Izanami answered him, full of sorrow. "You have come too late," she said, "for I have already eaten the food of this land. I have eaten at the hearth of Yomi, and so I have become a part of it, and I do not know if I can leave. But because you have come all this way for me, because you love me so, I will ask the gods of this place for permission to return. Only wait for me here. Wait and be patient, and do not," she said, "do not look at me. Whatever happens, do not look upon me until I return back into the deeper dark to make her plea." And Izanagi waited. He waited in the darkness of the hall of the dead. And he waited. And the time stretched on, and still she did not come. And the old, familiar doubt began to grow in him, the same doubt that has undone so many in so many stories. The waiting became unbearable. The darkness pressed in. He longed more than anything simply to see her, to know that she was there, to look upon the face of the wife he had come so far to find. And at last he could wait no longer. He broke a tooth from the comb he wore in his hair, and he set it alight to make a small torch, a single point of light in all that dark. And he lifted it, and he looked, and he saw her. But Izanami was no longer the bright goddess he had loved, for she had been long in the land of the dead, and death had done its work upon her. In the flickering light of his small torch, Izanagi saw the truth of what she had become in that shadowed country, and it filled him with a horror beyond anything he had known. This was not the life he remembered. This was death itself in the form he loved, and his nerve broke utterly, and he turned, and he fled. And Izanami, seeing that he had looked upon her, after she had begged him not to, was filled with grief and shame and a terrible anger. "You have shamed me," she cried. "You have looked upon what you swore not to see." And she sent the hags of the underworld rushing after him to catch him, and the warriors of the dead to drag him back. And Izanagi ran. He ran back up through the dark land of Yomi, with the powers of the dead in pursuit, and he used every trick he could to slow them. He flung down his headdress, and it became grapes, which the hags stopped to devour. He flung down his comb, and it became bamboo shoots, which they stopped to eat. He ran and he ran, up toward the world of the living, with all of death at his heels. And at last, he reached the great pass that led up out of Yomi, back into the light. And there, at the very boundary between the living and the dead, he found a great boulder, a stone so vast it would take 1,000 men to move it. And with all his strength, Izanagi rolled that great stone across the mouth of the pass, and sealed the land of the dead away from the land of the living forever. And from the other side of the stone, he heard the voice of Izanami, his lost wife, calling to him one last time. "If you seal me away like this," she cried, "then each day I will take 1,000 of the living down into death. And Izanagi answered her, through the stone, with his own grief and his own resolve. Then each day, he said, I will give life to 1,500. And so it was settled, and so it has been ever since. Each day the dead are taken, and each day more new life is born. A little more than is lost. The world goes on. Life outpaces death by just a little every single day, and the great stone stayed where it was, the living on one side, the dead on the other. And Izanagi turned away from it at last and climbed back up, alone, into the light of the living world. Izanagi came up out of the land of the dead, and he was unclean. He had walked in the country of death, among the rot and the shadow, and he felt the stain of it upon him, clinging to his skin, heavy on his spirit. And so, before he could return to the bright work of the living world, he had to cleanse himself. He went down to the mouth of a clear river where it met the sea, and he stripped away his clothes, and he stepped into the clean running water to wash the darkness of Yomi away. This act, this washing away of the stain of death in clear running water, became one of the most sacred ideas in all of the Japanese tradition. The cleansing, the purification, the washing of the spirit clean in pure water. And from it, in the story, something wonderful was born. For as Izanagi washed himself in the clear water, new gods came into being from the very act of his cleansing, from the things he cast off, and from the water itself, deities sprang into life. But the most important of all came at the very end, when he washed his face. As he washed his left eye, there came forth a goddess, and she was radiant. She shone with a light brighter than any of the gods who had come before. She was the sun itself, in the form of a goddess, and Izanagi named her Amaterasu, which means she who shines in heaven, the great and shining goddess of the sun. And his heart leapt with joy at the sight of her, for he saw at once that she was the most glorious of all his children. And as he washed his right eye, there came forth another, a god of softer, paler light, the moon. Izanagi named him Tsukuyomi, the moon counter, the god who would rule the night and measure out the months. And as he washed his nose, there came forth a third, a god wild and turbulent and strong, a god of storms and of the raging sea. And Izanagi named him Susanoo, the storm god, the wild one, whose moods would blow hot and cold like the great winds over the ocean. 3 children, born from the cleansing of the Creator God's face, the sun, the moon, and the storm. And Izanagi, looking upon these 3 radiant new gods, was filled with happiness, for they were the finest of all that he had made. And he divided the world among them. To Amaterasu, the Shining One, he gave the high plain of heaven and the rule of the day and of the sun. To Tsukuyomi, he gave the realm of the night. And to Susanoo, the storm god, he gave the rule of the seas. And so the great work of creation was, at last, nearly complete. The world was made. The land, the gods, the sun, and the moon, all were in their places. And the radiant sun goddess, Amaterasu, rose up to take her place in the high heaven. And her light fell upon all the islands of the world, and it was good. But the storm god, Susanoo, was not content, and his discontent would soon plunge the whole bright world into the deepest darkness it had ever known. Of the 3 radiant children, the storm god Susanoo was the one who could not be still. Izanagi had given him the rule of the seas. But Susanoo did not want the seas. He wept, and he raged, and he refused to take up his rule. He wept so long and so violently that his weeping withered the mountains and dried up the rivers, for his moods were as vast and as wild as the storms he was made of. And when his father asked him why he wept so, Susanoo said that he longed for his mother, Izanami, in the land of the dead, and wished to go down to her. And his father, weary at last of the storm god's endless turbulence, grew angry and banished him. "Go then," said Izanagi, "leave my world." And Susanoo, before he went, said that he would first go up to the high plane of heaven to say farewell to his sister, the sun goddess Amaterasu. But when Susanoo came up to heaven, he came like a storm. The mountains shook, the seas roared. The whole high plane of heaven trembled at his approach. And Amaterasu, the radiant sun goddess, feeling her brother coming up in such fury, feared that he had come to make war upon her, to seize her bright kingdom for himself. And so she armed herself. The gentle sun goddess bound up her hair and slung great quivers of arrows upon her back and took up her bow and stood ready to meet her wild brother in case he came as an enemy. But Susanoo, when he arrived, swore that he had not come to make war. He had come, he said, only to say farewell. And to prove the goodness of his intentions, the two of them performed a kind of trial together, a contest to show his good faith. And from this strange contest, new gods were born, gods who would become the ancestors of the imperial line of Japan. And for a moment, it seemed that all was well. The storm had passed. The brother and sister were at peace, but the peace did not hold. For Susanoo, flush with the victory of the contest, grew wild again and boastful, and his old turbulence rose up in him, and he began to run riot through the high plane of heaven. And what he did was terrible. In the sacred fields where Amaterasu grew the heavenly rice, he broke down the banks between the paddies and let the waters run wild, and ruined the careful work of the harvest. He flung filth into her holy halls, and worst of all, he came to the sacred weaving hall, where Amaterasu and her maidens sat weaving the bright garments of the gods. And there he did a thing so cruel and so violent that it shattered the peace of heaven entirely. He tore a hole in the roof of the weaving hall, and he flung down through it a great flayed horse, hurling it among the weaving maidens. And in the shock and the terror of it, one of the maidens was killed. The sacred order of heaven had been broken. The peace had been shattered. The violence of the storm god had spilled, at last, into the very heart of the holy places. And the radiant sun goddess, Amaterasu, looking upon all of this destruction, upon the ruined fields and the defiled halls and the death of her gentle maiden, was overcome. Not with anger, exactly, though there was anger in it, but with a deep and overwhelming grief and fear, and a sorrow so great that she could not bear to remain in the world a moment longer. And so she fled. She turned away from the brightness she had always given so freely, and she went, and she hid herself away. There was, in the high plane of heaven, a cave, a great cave in the rock with a heavy stone door. The Japanese called it the Heavenly Rock Cave, Ama no Iwato. And into this cave, the grieving sun goddess Amaterasu withdrew. She stepped inside, into the dark and the quiet, away from the ruined world and the violence of her brother and the grief of all that had happened. And she took the great stone door, and she drew it closed behind her, and she sealed herself inside, and the light went out of the world. For Amaterasu was the sun. And when the sun shut herself away in the cave and closed the door, there was no more sun anywhere. The high plane of heaven went dark. The world below went dark. The whole of creation, every island and mountain and field and sea, was plunged into a total and unbroken darkness, a night without end, a night with no promise of any dawn. Try to imagine it, not the ordinary darkness of a single night, which we know will end, but a darkness that simply would not lift. The sun, gone, not set but gone entirely, sealed away in the dark of the cave, with no certainty that she would ever come out again, and all the world left in blackness. And in that endless dark, the old story says, all manner of troubles arose. Without the sun, the world grew cold. The plants could not grow. And in the unbroken darkness, the voices of countless evil spirits, the malevolent gods, began to stir and to swarm, filling the dark like the buzzing of summer flies, working all manner of mischief and harm. For the light of the sun had not only given warmth and life, it had held the darkness and the things that live in darkness at bay. And now that light was gone, and all the troubles of the dark came swarming up at once. This was a catastrophe beyond any other. The death of Izanami had been a great sorrow, but the world had gone on. This was something else. This was the failure of the light itself, the withdrawal of the very source of life and warmth. If the sun did not come out of the cave, then nothing would grow, and the dark spirits would rule unchecked, and the world that Izanagi and Izanami had labored so long to make would wither and die in an endless, frozen night. The Japanese, who lived in a land of long winters and shortening autumn days, understood this fear in their bones. They knew the way the sun grows weak and low in the cold months. They knew the short gray days and the long dark nights of deep winter. And in this story, they gave that fear its grandest possible form. The sun, withdrawn entirely. The light, sealed away in the dark. The whole world waiting, in the cold and the black, for a dawn that might never come. Something had to be done. The light had to be brought back. And so the gods of heaven, all of them, came together to find a way. The old story says that there were 8 million gods. 8 million, which is to say, a number beyond counting. All the gods of heaven and earth, all the spirits of every river and mountain and tree and field, and in the great darkness, all 8 million of them gathered together in the dry bed of the heavenly river to hold a council, to put their many minds together and find some way to coax the sun goddess out of her cave and bring the light back to the dying world. And there was among them a god of great wisdom and cleverness, a god named Omoikane, the god of thought, whose mind could untangle any problem. And the god set him to the task of devising a plan, and he thought in the dark long and deeply, and at last he had it. A plan, not a plan of force, not a plan to break down the door, or to drag the goddess out against her will, for you cannot force the sun. A plan instead of cleverness and of joy, a plan to make Amaterasu so curious, so puzzled, that she would open the door herself, and the gods set to work there in the darkness, preparing everything that the plan required. First, they gathered the long crowing birds, the roosters, the cocks whose crowing announces the dawn, and they set them before the cave to crow. as if the morning were already coming. Then they sent for a great mirror, a mirror of polished bronze, round and bright, made by the smith gods with great care. And they sent for strings of beautiful curved jewels, magatama, the sacred kama-shaped jewels of green and white stone. And they took a great sakaki tree, a sacred evergreen, and they uprooted it, and they hung the bright mirror upon its middle branches, and the strings of jewels upon its upper branches, and streamers of white and blue. And they set this glittering, decorated tree before the mouth of the cave. And then they made noise. They made light. They lit great fires before the cave, the first fires to push back against the dark. They began a great and joyful commotion, all the gods together, right outside the sealed stone door. And at the very heart of the plan was a goddess. Her name was Ame no Uzume, the dread female of heaven, the goddess of the dawn and of merriment and of dance. And she was the one who would draw the sun out, not with force, but with joy. Ame no Uzume took up the role with her whole heart. She overturned a great tub before the cave to make a sounding board, a drum to stamp upon, and she took sprigs of bamboo grass in her hands to rustle and to wave. And she began to dance, and it was a wild dance, and a funny one, and a joyful one. She stamped upon the overturned tub so that it boomed like thunder. She waved her bamboo. She danced with such abandon, such comic and unrestrained delight, that she became more and more disheveled, and the dance grew more and more ridiculous, until at last it was so funny, so gloriously absurd, that all 8 million gods, watching in the firelight, burst out laughing. And the laughter of 8 million gods is no small thing. It rolled out across the dark plain of heaven like a great wave of sound. It boomed and it echoed, and it filled the darkness with the warm, rolling thunder of joy. 8 million gods laughing together, so loudly that the very high plane of heaven shook with the sound of their merriment. And inside the cave, in the dark and the silence, the sun goddess Amaterasu heard it. Amaterasu, alone in the dark of her cave, heard the laughter, and she was puzzled, deeply puzzled. She had withdrawn from the world in grief, expecting that the world without her would fall into darkness and despair, into cold and silence and mourning. And instead, what did she hear coming through the great stone door? Laughter, music, the booming of a drum and the rolling, joyful laughter of all the gods of heaven, louder and warmer and merrier than anything she could understand. How could this be? How could the world be making such joyful noise when she, the sun, the source of all light and life, had hidden herself away? What could they possibly have to laugh about? In the darkness she had left them in? Her curiosity at last overcame her grief. She could not help herself. She moved to the great stone door, and she pushed it open just a crack, just a little, just enough to peer out and to ask. And she called out through the crack in the door. "Why," she asked, "are you all making such merry? Why does the dread female dance? And why do all the 8 million gods laugh so, when the world should be sunk in darkness?" And here was the cleverness of the plan. For the dancing goddess Ame no Uzume had her answer ready. "We are laughing and rejoicing," she said, "because there is here among us a goddess more glorious than you, a new sun, brighter and more radiant than you have ever been. That is why we are so glad." And as she said it, The other gods quietly brought forward the great bright mirror on its sacred tree and held it up before the crack in the door. And Amaterasu, hearing that there was a goddess more radiant than herself, was astonished, and she opened the door a little wider to see this rival, this brighter sun. And she looked out, and there, in the mirror held up before her, she saw a face of dazzling, shining light gazing back at her, more brilliant than she could have imagined. She did not understand, in that moment, that the radiant face in the mirror was her own, that the brighter sun they spoke of was herself, her own light, reflected back at her out of the polished bronze. She only saw the glory of it and was drawn toward it, and leaned out a little further, and a little further still, to see. And in that moment, the strong god who had been waiting, hidden beside the door, a god named Tajikarao, the god of powerful hands, reached out and took her gently but firmly by the hand and drew her the rest of the way out of the cave into the open. And another god quickly stretched a sacred rope of rice straw across the mouth of the cave behind her, a Shimenawa, and said to her gently, "You may not go back in beyond this rope." And Amaterasu was out, and as she came forth from the cave, the sun came back into the world. The light returned. It spilled out across the high plain of heaven, and down upon all the islands of the world, warm and golden and alive. The long, terrible darkness broke all at once, and the dawn came flooding back over everything. The cold lifted. The swarming spirits of the dark fled back into their shadows. The plants felt the warmth again, and the whole world, which had been waiting in the frozen black for a dawn it feared would never come, was filled, suddenly, with light. The sun had come out of the cave. The morning had returned, and the gods, looking upon the radiant face of Amaterasu restored to the heavens, must have felt a joy beyond even the laughter that had drawn her out. For the worst thing that had ever happened, the failure of the light itself, had been undone. Gently, cleverly, with a mirror and a dance, and the warm sound of laughter in the dark, and Amaterasu took up her place again in the high heaven. And from that day, the old Japanese believed, she has never hidden herself away again. She rises each morning and crosses the sky and gives her light to all the world, faithfully, day after day after day. And her mirror, the bright mirror that drew her out of the cave, became one of the most sacred treasures of Japan, a symbol of the sun goddess herself, kept and honored for thousands of years. So that is the story of the sun in the cave, of how the light withdrew from the world and how it was so gently brought back. It is, when you look at it closely, a story about the very deepest of all our fears and the very deepest of all our comforts, set side by side. The fear is the fear of the dark that does not end, the withdrawal of the light, the long, cold, frightened waiting, in a blackness with no promise of a dawn. The old Japanese knew that fear in their long winters, just as we all know it, in our own dark nights and our own dark seasons. And they did not pretend it away. They gave it the grandest possible shape. The sun herself, gone into the cave, the whole world, dark. But notice what they set against that fear. Not force, not despair, but patience and cleverness, and above all, joy. The light was not dragged back by force. It could not be. The sun could not be commanded out of her cave. Instead, the gods gathered in the dark, and they made warmth, and they made music, and they made laughter, and they waited with a mirror ready for the light to grow curious and lean out and return on its own. And it did. It always does. That is the deep promise at the center of this old story. The light went into the cave, and the world went dark, and it seemed for a while that the dark might be forever. And then the sun came out again. The morning came. It always comes. And your sleep tonight is only a small and gentle version of that same great story. The light of your waking day is withdrawing now, sinking away. Like the sun slipping into the cave, the dark is gathering around you, and that is exactly as it should be. You do not need to fear it. You do not need to hold the light or keep watch over it, or stay awake to make sure it comes back. It will come back on its own. The way Amaterasu came out of the cave, the way the sun rises every single morning, whether anyone is watching or not. So let the light withdraw. Now, let yourself sink down into the soft dark of sleep. The way the sun sinks into the quiet of the cave, there is no violence here and no grief, only rest. Only the gentle closing of the door for a little while on the long day behind you. And while you sleep, the gods are gathering in the dark. The fires are lit. The mirror is ready. The dawn is being prepared quietly just beyond the door. And in the morning, the light will come flooding back into the world, warm and golden and alive. And it will fall upon you and wake you gently into a new day. But that is for later. That is for the morning. For now, there is only the quiet and the dark, and the soft closing of the door. So rest now. Let go. Let the light withdraw. The sun will come out of the cave again. It always does. Good night.